In a few hours, Greek voters will be heading off to the polls and the fate of the European single currency is pretty much in their hands. So could the vote trigger the so-called nuclear option where markets will simply melt down? I spoke to Westpac's Russell Jones. Russell, investors and probably everyone in the world really are juggling three hand grenades at the moment: Europe, the US and China. So let's start with the one that's got the pin out, that's Europe, and specifically Greece and the election on the weekend. Can you run us through what are the likely outcomes and the consequences of the Greek election?
The Greek election is extremely uncertain at this stage. I think there are really two most likely outcomes. The first one is that the far left grouping actually comes out on top, and I think that would be extremely troubling from the point of view of global financial markets. I think the response to that would be sell first and ask questions later, because I think this is a group of politicians who really want to unwind a lot of the austerity which has been put in place in Greece, not surprisingly, quite frankly. But by doing that, I think ultimately they're likely to default on some of their obligations, and it may even lead to the exit of Greece from the Eurozone. If, on the other hand, the centre parties dominate, well, I still think we're in a situation where things are going to be uncertain for some time. There will have to be some renegotiation or recalibration of the austerity programme and the assistance which is being provided by the rest of Europe and the rest of the world, for that matter, and we're not really going to know precisely how that's done for some weeks. So either way, I think we're still left with a situation which is, it's not going to be that clear. It's going to be shades of grey probably rather than black and white. But as I say, I think the big concern for markets will be if the far left comes out on top.
But isn't it possible that if the left comes out on top in the Greek election, the central banks of the world, and in particular the European Central Bank, respond by putting more liquidity into the banking system to counteract it? Because some people are saying that a left-wing victory in Greece will actually result in a rally on the stock markets as a result of what the central banks might do.
There are increasing signs over the last 24 hours that there are some contingency plans being put in place in case of that far-left victory. There's also a G20 meeting that takes place on Monday and Tuesday of next week. And so it would be surprising if there wasn't some kind of response, and the most obvious one would be for central banks to provide liquidity to financial markets to try and calm things down.
So apart from Greece, what are you most worried about, Spain or Italy?
My biggest concern is Italy, quite frankly, and for two reasons. First of all, the Italian economy growth potential is pretty close to zero at the moment. And secondly, I think the appetite within the broader population and the political community for austerity is rapidly diminishing. The problem with Italy is that, frankly, it's too big to bail, as it were. It's far too large an economy for the rest of Europe to be in a position really to come to its rescue. If the Italian economy, the Italian financial markets continue to deteriorate, that would be an extremely dangerous development from the point of view of the sustainability of the euro as a whole.
We're just moving to the US now. The US economy does seem to be deteriorating. What are the chances of more monetary stimulus there, in particular another QE3?
There's a pretty high probability, quite frankly. The US economy is definitely slowing. Inflationary pressures are moderating. We saw a very low inflation print this week on the CPI. And of course, there is this concern that the situation in Europe is going to continue to deteriorate and that the United States will be influenced by that. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if over the next 3 or 6 months we do see some kind of monetary policy response. Whether it occurs in the next few weeks really is dependent upon the situation in Europe and so on. But the notion of QE3, I think, remains firmly on the policy agenda in the US.
And on China, its economy is slowing as well. Where do you think, and when do you think, the Chinese economy will bottom out?
We're of the opinion that we're pretty much there in terms of the bottoming out process, that financial conditions have started to ease up in China. That's a good thing. We've seen policy stimulus measures coming through on both the fiscal and the monetary side, and there is some tentative evidence that the economy is starting to pick up again.
And just finally, what does all this mean for Australia, do you think?
If Europe really does disintegrate, no one escapes, not even Australia, no matter how geographically removed it is from the Eurozone. financial markets will seize up in that event, and Australia will be affected negatively. Already confidence in this part of the world is definitely under pressure because of the international situation. So if Europe blows up, Australia definitely suffers. If we put that to one side and assume it doesn't happen, I still think that this sense of uncertainty internationally is going to weigh on the domestic consumer here. Whatever's happening in terms of the mining boom, the domestic consumer seems to be in a very depressed state of mind, and I think that suggests that the Reserve Bank here in Australia probably still got some work to do.
Thanks very much, Russell.
Thank you.